Thank y'all for coming out today. Our guest today is King Simpson. He's going to talk about the tragic family feud between Dr. C.P. Lee and J.D. Morrow. Dun, 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 dun. Let's give a big hand.
Yeah. Thank you all very much. I've been to several of these programs over the years, but never had a reason to present one. So I was excited when Mark gave me this opportunity to talk about a family a story that I've been looking into off and on for many, many years. So I will give you a little bit of an introduction here. So this is a true story. It comes from our family. Happened in the late 19th century here in Kentucky. It's a tale of family, maybe a little bit of scandal with fatal consequences. And this is a really poor rendition of I did out of my memory just from what I saw in the accounts and the things I've read about it and the stories I've heard. So let me introduce you to some of the key players that you'll find. So the gentleman pictured here is Dr. Charles Penick Lee, Jr. He was a local physician. He lived in the Daysville area. He was born in 1869. You also hear about Jefferson Davis Morrow, who was actually Lee's second cousin, and Annie Morrow, who was J.D.'s sister, of course, also Lee's cousin. Those are the central figures that you'll see in this family conflict. The scene is primarily Todd County, Kentucky. As I already mentioned, Dr. Lee and his family lived in the Lee family home in Daysville. That's the farm where we still have family living today. Some of the drama will take place closer to Elkton, of course, which was the nearest big town that they might have gone to. And then also the Morrow family lived in nearby Gordonsville. So all in a very pretty tight little area there in Kentucky is where most all of this is going to unfold. So to give you a clue of why I'm interested in this and how I fit into this picture, so I am King Simpson. So I'm here at the bottom of this family tree. My mom, Patricia, wave your hand, Patricia, so people know who you are. Most everybody probably knows her, but she's my mother. Her father was Paul Beecham Lee, PB Lee. This is a picture of him. This is just a trivia fact here. That was taken at the Royal Tone Studio here in Russellville. If any of you all are familiar with that, you might recognize that name. I won't go through the entire family tree, but I will mention, since I mentioned PB, that his son is also here, my uncle, Paul. So we did not have a definite picture of their father, of Paul Beecham's father, John Wesley. So I've included a picture of his gravestone. I'm going to do a quick aside to say, if you have photos at home that you know who the people are, and they don't have the name written on the back, please take time right away. Do it this weekend, do it tonight, do it sometime very soon, because we all know who they are, right? But will our children and will our grandchildren know? So we have, just like a lot of other people, we have family albums at home. They're full of photos of people we think might be this person or that person, but often we have no clue who they are. If it was just a photo that was given to our family, if we inherited it from some long lost somebody. Possibly. But do please keep that in mind. Please do that for not only for you, because it won't benefit you, but it'll benefit your descendants one day when they hopefully get interested in their family history and start looking back at this sort of stuff. John Wesley's father was the original Charles Penick Lee. You'll usually see him referred to as either just Penick or C.P. Lee. That's a picture of him up there at the top. And then in addition to John Wesley and some other children, the main character we're going to focus on just for our purposes is his son, who is his namesake. There's a picture of him again there to the side. So the father, Penick Lee, had a very prolific family tree. So he had 6 sons and 4 daughters, one of whom did not survive infancy. But all these are his sons there. The names that you're going to see throughout this story, of course, Charlie, Dr. C.P. Lee Jr., and then Ben will play a minor part as well. So the way they connect with the Morrows, because we said this was a family feud, so we had traced back to original Pinochle, right? So his parents, David Lee and Sally Morrow, there's that name. This would have been my fourth great grandfather, Thomas Morrow here. Had, in addition to Sally, had a son named Thomas who begat Underwood, who begat, among other children, J.D., Jefferson Davis Morrow, and Anna Morrow. And if you remember from when I was introducing you to our main characters, those three across the bottom are going to be the primary characters that unfold in this drama with us. And just so, because sometimes it's confusing when you're trying to remember all this, so they're all second cousins across that bottom line. That's their relationship. So the root of the conflict: in May of 1895, Annie Morrow, who is unmarried, gives birth to a child. Obviously, especially at that time, that was a major scandal in a family. There was a lot of cause for turmoil. And Dr. Lee, her second cousin, was accused. That was the phrase they would have used at that time, accused of being the father. So keep in mind, we have to not look at this through a 2025 lens. We're looking at this through an 1895 lens. So the mores and the expectations of society were very different. They were still in the Victorian period. There was a lot of different beliefs about how family should be structured and what happened if a woman were to be ruined. Is a phrase you'll hear used a lot, that sort of thing, by having relationships out of wedlock. So a lot of these personal conflicts that you hear about from this time are coming out of these broader social context, societal tensions. So the tension that women can't be in a consensual relationship or be interested in a man like a man is interested in a woman. That was a common, prevalent belief, which we now no longer typically hold to. But a lot of times these historical events are complex and nuanced. And of course, when we get this far removed, a lot of times some of the detail is lost forever. We uncover everything we can. If you've ever delved into family history and local history, it's super exciting to uncover some little tidbit or some trivia, but we also have to at some point reconcile ourselves to understand that what we found may be all there is, and a lot of that is lost to time. That's another thing I'll tell you to do: tell stories about your family, and the family that you remember, maybe that your kids and grandkids don't remember. Write them down for them is even better, because when they get older and are interested in this, even if they're not right now, they'll have that to pull back on, and all that won't be lost to history. So there were two violent encounters between Dr. Lee and J.D. Morrow. The first one happened in May of 1895. They met on the Russellville Pike near Elkton, and there were 9 shots that were exchanged between them. Dr. Lee was the only one that we know of that was wounded. It was reported in the hip and shoulder he was wounded. Morrow left and went home, so there was no eyewitnesses, so they're not sure if he was injured or not, but obviously not too bad. So you'll see the articles. This is from the Hopkinsville, Kentucky. It mentions it was the outgrowth of a scandal. This is from the Owensboro Messenger. The cause of the trouble is that 3 weeks ago, Miss Annie Morrow of Gordonsville, Logan County, who was a sister of J.D. Morrow, gave birth to a child, and Lee was accused. There's that phrase I mentioned earlier. This morning they met on the road and began to shoot at each other. So this was their first encounter. Here, some references call it a duel. I don't think it was a duel in the traditional sense of they counted off paces and shot at each other. I think it was more tempers boiling over and shots being fired. But those are the references you'll see to the first encounter, which, keep in mind, is in May of 1895. So we fast forward. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, farmers on the road would be carrying rifles and stuff. Was it a gun pistol duel shooting, or was it?
None of the reports I've seen have mentioned specific types of firearms. The firearm type is mentioned in this next encounter, but in this encounter, everything I've seen, there were, I think, 4 articles I found from the time, and no report said specifically what sort of weapon was used. I would guess if they're injured, maybe not in a severe way, it may have been a pistol, but that's just conjecture. Sorry, if you guys have questions or want to stop and cover something, or I'm not explaining something well, please stop me at any point, and I'll be glad to do that if I noticed your hand. And Mark's my caller, I guess, like the auctioneers have the caller. He's watching for it, so I appreciate that, Mark.
I have a question.
Yes.
So May, that was when she had given birth. Right?
Yes.
So it was like within that same month.
Right. Yeah. Okay. This one, this newspaper article, I don't have an exact date of the birth, but 3 weeks ago is when it was referenced. So about the beginning of May, Annie, who was JD's sister, obviously both of them second cousins to Dr. Lee, gave birth, and then this is by the end of the month, it's come to beyond blows and gone to shots being fired at each other. So
Did you find out on the child?
I have not. So this is still a in progress, and if you ever talk to anybody that does any sort of family history, and I'm far from an expert, but anybody that does family history and local history research, you're never really done. At some point, you have to accept that you found what you can find, but there's always other avenues, and I've got 1,000 different things just with this case, not to mention my entire family tree that I would love to chase down. I have not found, I found reference to Annie later on living in Florida, but I have not tracked down. I just haven't taken the time to sit down and really dig through and try to find if she has relations that still live in there, if there's still descendants that are alive. Yes, to the best of my knowledge, I have no record of the child passing away. Yeah, and that's something else that that I've considered. Yeah, now DNA obviously opens up a lot of new possibilities. Right. So that's, again, May 1895, shortly after Lee-Morrow gives birth, that this first encounter happens. Fast forward a little under 2 years, May 1st, 1897. Again, there's something about meeting on the road, man. It's just, well, these guys did not go well. So 2 of the brothers, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Lee and his younger brother Ben, were leaving the family place at Daysville and heading to Elkton in their buggy. As they're traveling down the road, they cross paths with J.D. Morrow, who's going in the opposite direction. He had been coming from town, and Morrow lets them get a few paces past, turns around with a double-barrel shotgun and empties both barrels in the direction of the brothers. Dr. Lee was hit the most severely. Ben was minorly injured. But certainly we know Dr. Lee would have been his primary target based on their previous encounters. But these are a couple of the articles. Dr. Lee is thought to be fatally injured, but his brother only a flesh wound. The shooting resulted from an old grudge between the families. So we've gone from these very specific details being mentioned in the story, and sometimes it's just an old grudge, which is only 2 years, or less than 2 years. But you see a little bit more detailed account over there. But basically what I've related. So this is where things turn what appears to be, by all likelihood at this point in the story, deadly. We see that. So now, as with sometimes news is right, sometimes it's wrong, right? So this is from Lincoln, Nebraska, and Pequot, Ohio. They reported that Dr. C.P. Lee was shot and killed that day. So we know that he lived on beyond that day. He was not killed that day. So somebody got their story and got a little off there, missed a few important details. This is from a paper that was in Madisonville, Kentucky, called The Hustler. I'm just going on. This is my king's conjecture off of just reading this article. I think it may have been sort of a sensationalist rag of a newspaper. I'll read you a few excerpts off here. There must be something in the air they breathe or in the water they drink in Todd County that causes people up there to get on their fighting clothes and shoulder their guns. Blood has become quite a cheap commodity in that bailiwick. And then it goes on to tell of one story, and then I'll jump down here to the middle. On last Saturday, Jeff Morrow met Dr. Lee and his brother on the highway, and he opened fire on the brothers. The doctor is thought to be mortally wounded, while the brother has a few bullet holes in him. Morrow's out on bond to answer for the shooting. And then if you skip to the end, it tells of another shooting that had occurred. It says, if these are cases of justifiable shooting, then it would appear that Todd County has a number of fellows that have needed killing for some time. So obviously they were going for a little bit more of the emotional, sensational reaction than some of these other, they're doing a little editorializing in addition to sharing the news there. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with that paper, if that was a trademark of theirs or somebody was just really feeling their oats that day. I'm not sure, but okay. So this is not a one-off occurrence, which was my guess. Yes.
Why do you think that story was covered in Lincoln, Nebraska and a Piqua, Ohio paper?
Typically, and Mark, of course, does a lot more local history and probably some other folks than I do, but a lot of times they would pick up just these little bits and pieces, and you would just have 3 or 4 lines of some sensational story. Now, if they had heard that he'd been wounded, I'm guessing it probably wouldn't have even made it in the paper. But since they thought it was a murder,
it's good to have filler, even though it gets people going to read the paper. Sensational.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for times in Kentucky to read all across papers in Kentucky.
Right. But these were the 2 furthest I found. I found some others that had some amount of fact and fiction mixed in, and some of them corroborated each other better. But those were 2 of the further instances I found. So this is the day of the shooting, and I've tried to mark anywhere you see red text, it should be helping you figure out the timeline, because I'm going to go through a bunch of dates and stuff, and I know it's hard if you haven't looked at this before to keep this straight. But the day of the shooting, Jeff Morrow was arrested in Logan County, I'm assuming Gordonsville there where he lived, the evening of the shooting. And then within a couple of days, he had been brought back to Elkton for an examining trial there. His bond was set at $2,000. He gave and was released. And then it gives an update on Dr. Lee as being in critical condition, with attending a physician's report recovery exceedingly doubtful. So at this point, I don't think I had it one of the ones from the first day, the first accounts, but it said that he wasn't able to speak or give any sort of evidence or anything like that. So obviously very previously wounded here. So he was taken to the residence of L.H. Bailey for care. They didn't think they could bring him home or get him anywhere else. He was paralyzed by his wounds, and the chances of recovery were slim. Something I thought was really interesting, I don't have the paper, I'd written down some notes about this, but that x-rays were used on him. If you keep in mind, November of 1895, the x-ray was accidentally discovered. So we didn't even know x-rays existed less than 2 years, or about a year and a half before this. In early 1896, they did the first clinical use and the first use of x-rays during surgery. And in 1897, they were used for the first time in a battlefield during the Balkan War. So just cutting edge technology for 1897 that x-rays were even available. So there were several accounts just, I'm thinking on the fact that the x-rays were used at all. So the first one gives a short recap of the story, and then says he was successfully experimented upon with x-rays Tuesday. We wouldn't say experimented upon with x-rays. That kind of shows you how new the technology was. The people weren't used to hearing about that. But several buckshot were located in his back. Articles were photographed through his body. And it tells of somebody else who got brought in because they had shot themselves there. The article on the right, Mark actually helped me find this week. I had seen some about the x-rays, but I had not seen these two in particular, and this one that gave examples of where the doctors were coming from. So there was a doctor from the Clarksville Sanitarium. There was a doctor and a professor from Southwestern University in Clarksville, and then, of course, several other physicians and attendants. I'm sure a lot of them were probably just wanting to see the technology in use and learn about it since it was new. But they were able to do that. And so that article, this one said several buckshot were located. That one said they succeeded in locating 2 balls. Either way, they considered it a success. Though his condition remained critical, it mentions in this article his body temperature was staying around 104. So we're seeing signs of a month after some ill effects really taking hold of him, even though he's recovered from the initial shock of it. He's still obviously not doing well. Yes, yeah. If I uncover that, I'll be over the moon.
So according to that last article, it was done in that family's house.
Yes.
Right? Like he was never taken.
No, he was never taken out of the Bailey's home. He stayed there the entire time.
So they
would have had
experimental X-rays
right.
in just somebody's country home.
Yeah, that was also before they found out they were dangerous, so nobody wore any sort of protection, stood behind a wall, wore the X-ray, the lead vest like you wear when you go to the dentist. If you ever look up old pictures from the 1890s, I'm doing X-rays. I mean, they're just X-ray in their hand and sitting there watching it, and yeah, they're probably they're just right. So it was definitely the Wild West of medical technology at that point. So 49 days after the shooting, it's June 18th, 1897, Dr. Lee finally succumbs to his injuries. So several reports in papers across the region of this. This one from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and mentions that they did an operation on him. I believe this was on a Tuesday and he died on that Friday. They removed 3 shot in this operation and several broken pieces of his spinal column. He stood the operation well, but suffering in many weeks, which he was so patiently borne, caused him to gradually grow weaker. So mentions that. Also mentions at the end of the article that Lee-Morrow came back to town that morning, was rearrested. It says within an hour after Lee's death, with a charge of murder preferred against him. Nashville Banner also had an article I'd also not discovered until recently with help from Mark, that several of them mentioned blood poisoning for the first time. So a lot of the articles I had found in the past just said he had succumbed to his injuries, but some of them specifically give the cause as blood poisoning as a result of his wounds. Again, this one mentions that Morrow brought himself to town and surrendered himself. This one says that there's a lot of indignation against Morrow and it's growing stronger. I just don't know at the time if they would have had the knowledge or maybe even the wording for that. So it could have been infection, it could have been lead, or more than likely a number of factors. David, you've got some medical background. Do you have any you want to jump in there?
I would say more like infection.
Right.
Just because they don't have the antibiotics.
Yeah. And he'd had that,
Like you said, combination.
right, that 104 fever that they said he had for a while. So that points toward infection probably. So he had a lot of factors obviously working against him there. So before I read this, before I go on, if you all will bear with me, I'm going to read you this account. This is actually how I came to know that this event ever happened. So we live in, my wife and I, this is Taylor, my wife, here in the front row. We live in my grandparents' old house. So Paul B. Lee that you saw there at the beginning, that was the house where my mom and my uncle grew up. So when we were moving it in, we were going through some things that were still in there. And then with some other papers, I found just this photocopied article. I don't know what paper it's from because they didn't write that on the back or anything, but it's about the death and burial of C.P. Lee. So kind of beautiful, flowery Victorian language, but also some good details. So if you all will bear with me, I'll read this to you before we continue. Never has a man more coolly, unflinchingly, and heroically faced mankind's fell destructor than did Dr. Charles P. Lee, who died Friday morning at 5 o'clock from the effects of a gunshot wound inflicted in the back by Jeff Morrow on May 1st. 49 days of suffering, calmly and patiently borne, had worn out his physical strength, but the mortal strength and courage so strongly marked in him were present to the last. His end was calm and peaceable, characterized by a thorough presence of mind and wholly without fear of death. When informed by his physician that he could live but a short while longer, he appeared perfectly resigned to his fate. He had labored hard, he said, to qualify himself for a life useful both to himself and fellow men. And it seemed hard to be cut down just at the time when the future looked brightest. Sorry, the quality of this is not as great as I would want. Nevertheless, he added, I will make the most of it. It was touching to be around his deathbed. He first called his aged father, who stood by to see the many fond hopes he had in him. I can't read a couple of the words, I'm sorry. To vanish, never to be realized, and assured him that he had been everything a good father could be. One by one, he bade his brothers a last farewell. Among them, he distributed his earthly belongings and demonstrated his love of law and right by requesting them not to avenge his death on Morrow, but to let the law take its course. So that's probably why this feud ends here rather than maybe going on through generations. I'm glad I'm not having to fight anybody these days. He expressed his most heartfelt thanks to Mr. L.H. Bailey and wife, at whose home he had been ever since the shooting, so he never did leave, for their kindness and care exercised toward him. To the physician who had so faithfully attended him and the nurse who had so tenderly watched over him, he spoke words of gratitude and love. The young lady in a distant state whom he had loved and by whom he had been remembered in misfortune, he bade them write a farewell message, and it was fitting that a bouquet of flowers sent by her during his sickness was placed in his hand while lying in his coffin. He once more called his father, and in a distinct voice and apparently clear state of mind, informed him that he saw his mother, whom he had promised to meet in the other world. He requested them to draw aside the window curtain, and he might once more see the light of day, and upon looking out remarked, "Yes, it is a beautiful morning." A few minutes later he died, and those who knew and loved him doubtless saw the soul of Dr. Charles P. Lee had entered upon the morning of a life where there is no uncertainty, but where progression into higher things continues unbroken forever. The funeral services were conducted at the Bailey home by Dr. J.M. Gill Saturday morning. A large number of people who had come to show their love and respect for the young man were present. Dr. Gill's remarks were a beautiful tribute to the memory of the deceased and full of consolation to the heartbroken members of the family. One of the longest processions ever seen in this county followed the remains to the family burying grounds near Daysville, where they were interred with KFP honors. The grave was covered with many beautiful floral offerings. So a little bit of the tribute, and very infrequently at this time period you would have known somebody's final words unless they were somebody of tremendous prominence. So again, this was my first clue. I ran across this and I was like, okay, I got to ask Mom about this next time I talk to her and find out a little bit more. So after finding out what the family knew, then that gave me an opportunity to start digging in and using some of those skills Mark and others have taught me working at the library to learn a little bit.
Is that a coat of arms on the grave or some kind of insignia?
I believe it is, and I've not done any research into that. It says FBC on there, and it's got crossed axes or halberds. Okay, so that's the KFP honors they were talking about.
And the letters on the shield, as you look at it, stand for words of virtue. Right at the moment, I can't recite them for you, but that's a Knights of Pythias symbol.
Okay, so when we mentioned that the KFP honors in there, that's what it's in reference to. That's great. I'm not. I've heard of it, but I don't know any. Does anybody know about the organization?
Did you know about the organization or anything?
familiar with it, but if I remember right, it may have to do with orphans, and it's a brotherhood of orphans. Now, again, maybe it's a group that helped
Serves,
something
sure,
like that.
right. And there were a lot of fraternal organizations, obviously, back in this time period, way more than there are that still exist today.
I think it still exists. It's not big.
Okay. And there, so at one point, this gravestone looked a little different. There was a pink marble cylinder that was included in there. Unfortunately, before my time, the graveyard was vandalized, and some of that was knocked over, destroyed, and otherwise. So this is the repaired grave of Dr. Lee there. This is a photo of the Lee family cemetery that's there on the farm where we live. That is Dr. Lee's grave. This is his father, C.P. Lee, and this is Virginia Martin Lee. That's his mother there. So he's buried right beside him. You can't see it here, but there's a flat stone down here for the sister who died, Maggie, the sister who died in infancy as well. So this is right on the Todd and Logan line there, straddles the line there in Daysville. On our family farm, we've got 8 generations of Lees, and obviously I'm not a Lee, but descendants of the Lees that have lived there on that farm all those years.
The doctor died and some babies from, would that been a descendant or ancestor? She was the baby.
This was pretty close to Elkton, so I don't know if any of the Baileys that Miss Richardson was connected with. I know they, a lot of them were in South Logan, so I don't know, but they could have very easily had family that was in that area. Yeah, certainly could. Some of those families moved around a little, but most people didn't move around a lot. As you can tell, we didn't move around a lot. We stayed pretty well stayed in one place.
I was going to add just a little bit more about
Yeah.
picture about the family. Somebody had got a Jeep, a 4-wheel drive Jeep, and ran over those stones and knocked them all over. And when I was growing up, I remember being down. I don't know who else.
Just several people in the community got together and, set them back up.
But I do remember being down.
But this happened when I'm 75 years old, and it happened when I was a child. I can remember it happening. One Sunday morning, somebody came by and said, "Have you seen your cemetery?" And these people had just pushed all these, old tombstones over. And on this one, there was a large pink marble cylinder, and somebody stole it out of the cemetery, which that happened a lot of years ago. I think now it's a serious charge to do that. But.
Yep. So, also just point out this one you can see right here in the end is Ben. So that was the brother that was with Dr. Lee, who has received a minor injury when he received his mortal wounds. So definitely buried right there alongside a lot of family and loved ones. Yeah, his CP senior, and then Virginia, who would have been his mother, is buried over there.
Stones made out of it's really neat type stone. It's only crystal, but it's rock, but it's stone.
Yeah.
The stones were possibly from Bowling Green. There used to be a quarry over there that had this type of stone. And again, I would have to look at the dates to see, but you see that white, not quite marble, but it's a bit of a soft stone coming out of the quarry of Bowling Green.
And it's the dates and everything are extremely well preserved on hers and CP's both.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were probably making it up even after the deaths for CP Jr. or Penny, one who got shot, the doctor. His was probably put around the time of his death, I would say.
Yeah.
Of course, he died first. And then,
His mother died 1892, I believe, so 5 years before her. Yeah, CP, the father, outlived 3 wives, so he hung in there for quite a while. All right, so unfortunately, Dr. Lee has passed, so now the question turns to what's going to happen to the man who shot him. So J.D. Morrow, and it mentions here in this article from July, he killed Charlie Lee in Todd County a few months ago, indicted by the grand jury, which has been in session this week at Elkton for murder. So this is 7 weeks after the shooting, 1 month after Lee's death, roughly. So here's the true bill that was returned against him by the grand jury, and then the other paperwork that goes along with that. I've got copies of that if anybody wants to look at it afterwards. There's the copies I got when I went and pulled these records that are over there. They're a little bit more legible probably than they are on the screen, but wanted to include those. So we're 1 month after Lee's death. 6 weeks after Lee's death, there's a notice in the paper that the case has been continued, that Morrow came to circuit court, gave a $5,000 bond for his appearance then. So as you might expect, he didn't really like being in jail apparently. So made his bond and got out of there. These are a couple of copies of the subpoenas to folks in Todd and Logan County that would have been called as witnesses in the case. And that's in November of 1897 when that happens. So his trial date is mentioned here, among other things, in this article. It's one of the most important cases that'll be heard by Judge Reeves, who announces his retirement in the same article. So we're almost 6 months out from Lee's death here in this article. And then December 18th, 1897, so we are full 6 months out from his death. Of course, the shooting preceded that, when he is found guilty, not of the murder charge, but of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. He is sentenced to 3 years in the state penitentiary in Eddyville. It mentions here the case was one of the most hotly contested ones in the history of the county litigation on account of the prominence of both families, and that it lasted for over a week. Also amazing how fast the trials happened back then, that somebody died and then 6 months later they're getting sentenced. You wouldn't say that. Now they wouldn't even be thinking about starting a trial these days after 6 months. So almost immediately, so this is just 13 days after the sentencing, there are pleas for him to be pardoned by the governor. So senator and judge from Todd County, along with another prominent gentleman, I guess, from Louisville, had gone to talk to the governor to ask him to be pardoned. It mentions in that article that a couple of folks who had recently been denied pardons as well. And then a little less than 2 weeks later, there's an announcement that comes out that Governor Bradley was refusing pardon for Morrow. It says there at the end that he said the killing was unjustifiable. So Morrow is not going to be pardoned at this time. So we're in January of 1898, so we've crossed over into the new year here. And then by August of 1898, a conditional pardon is granted to Jeff Morrow because it said he's dying of consumption at Eddyville Penitentiary, which was not uncommon for that time period. He'll be sent home, but if he recovers, he's to be returned to the penitentiary. So at this point, we're 13 and a half months after Lee's death, about 7.5 months after his sentencing. So he's pretty early still in a sentence, relatively short sentence of 3 years. And he's served far less than a year at this point. He's already out and going home due to illness. From everything that I can find, there's no evidence that he ever went back to prison, though he lived another 48 years. After this, he didn't die after the killing, 47 years after he was released. So I would think he had fully recovered probably by that point. So 1945 is when he ended up passing away again. No record I could ever find of where he was taken back to prison and served out the rest of his sentence. So less than a year. Some of my unanswered questions, some of the things I would still like to look into. Obviously, some of this stuff we may never know, but potentially with DNA evidence, we could figure out that first one was Anna or Annie, however you want to refer to her, was her child actually fathered by Dr. Lee. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't know.
You had your hand raised. I thought you were going to reveal something you forgot to tell me.
Some of you all remember Sam Akers, who lived in Daysville, okay, right up the road from Daysville. And of course, Sam and my daddy were friends, and then his daddy would have been living at the time this happened. Sam, and I wish I had talked to him more about this, but a few years before Sam passed away, he was talking to me one day, and he said something, brought this up, and I said, well, I really don't know much about it, and he said, well, Dr. Lee was not the father of that child. The father was somebody that the Morrow guy didn't want her to marry, evidently ne'er do well or something. And he wanted her to marry this Dr. Lee because he thought that she would be, taken care of and, live in a style, I guess you'd say. But that's
Right.
what I know. And
So,
Sam, I don't think he would have told me something that wasn't, he didn't think was right.
right.
So, Tricia, do you think that Dr. Morrow refused? Is that?
That's what Sam thought.
That was my question. Did the doctor affirm or deny? And did the young lady ever give a statement as to who the father might be?
In the court records I found, there was the reason for the confrontation was mentioned, but there was never any statements from either one of them saying who the father was, what happened, anything like that. So if that was mentioned in court, it was not recorded anywhere. I tend to lean toward that interpretation myself. Obviously, there's several possibilities, but the fact that, maybe since he was a doctor, maybe he was a better fit for somebody. Was she having a relationship with both of them? Was she just having a relationship with one? It makes you wonder. Initially, when I went into it, I thought maybe, it was a case where he was interested in her and she was not interested in him, and something untoward happened, but that never came up in the court proceedings, so that pretty well eliminated that. I think a lot of it was just these Victorian era norms that somebody had to be held responsible. Usually some man had to stand up and be responsible for that.
Who was J.D. Moore? I mean, was he a farmer? Or?
He was a farmer. And of course, yeah, his second. Yeah, right. That was a lot of money in 1897, and a $2,000 bond before that. So yeah, but he was a prominent farmer. Again, tied in with the family from a few generations back there. And he lived in Gordonsville. They lived in Daysville, so they were nearby. I don't see a lot about him outside of these cases and his death from just what I've looked into. There may be more out there, but a lot of times, unless it's something pretty sensational, most people don't get in the paper a whole lot. In those days, they're either in the social page or the something to do with some scandal or large event. Oftentimes there. I do know from JD's obituary that his sister Anna had relocated to Florida, was living there at the time of his death. But as far as what happened with her child, that's something I haven't tracked down yet. So that's still on my to-do list. And then if there are any Morrow relatives that are out of this branch of the family, if they're still in that, I know there are Morrows in this area, but whether or not they're direct descendants of anybody that would be in the same part of the family. Again, no ill will here. This is not my fight. I'm not hunting them down, but would still like to know if there's some of them
But
who live in this area.
wasn't very much.
Do what?
A 3-year sentence.
Oh, right, sure.
Very
It was
light.
extremely light, and then the fact that it was never, from what we can tell, served out. Yeah, the paperwork, and there's some of it over there, talks about, and of course it's all handwritten, it's a little bit harder to read. Yeah, they talked about what the minimum amounts. If you think they did this, it's willful murder, obviously, much higher sentence. If it's not that, then if it meets these criteria, it's voluntary manslaughter. But a lot of different options they gave the jury there, and they ultimately went with voluntary manslaughter with a 3-year prison sentence. So this is sort of where I've gotten to with the case. Again, it's still, I'm interested in it. I would love to track down some of these leads. It's the hope of everybody that looks at their family history that you'll turn up one more interesting thing. Some of those pictures I had not seen. That picture of Dr. Lee that I showed at the beginning, and it's over here. You guys can look at it when we're done if you'd like to see it in person. I had never personally seen that until this week. Mom got to digging around in some pictures, and it was one of the few. There was a whole album, and there were about 3 photos that somebody had actually written. An older relative that would have known had written in some names on those. So that was the reason we were able to know who they were. So again, don't neglect to do that for your family when you go home.
No idea who Diana Morrow married to, perhaps when she relocated to Florida.
I do not.
She'd probably under a different name.
Right. Well, she was at the time of her brother's death, and it could have just been that they listed because nobody at home would have known who it was. But she was listed as Anna Morrow in his obituary in 1945. So, do what? Right. Okay. You think even if it was from
his sister was like Mrs. John Smith.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
So then it's likely she never.
So possibly she never married. Yeah, because by that point she would have been. Dr. Lee was 26 or 7 at the time that he was killed, and I think she was the same age.
What kind of a doctor was he?
I don't know that either. That's also on my to-do list to search some more information about that. I haven't.
Too, in that picture, him over there makes it more apparent. Maybe that was the case. I think he went to Indianapolis.
Yeah, we noticed when we were pulling that picture that it says, of course, a lot of those older pictures would tell you the name of the studio was imprinted on the bottom of the photo. And that photo was taken in Indianapolis. So we wondered, and from his age, it looks like it might be about right that he might have been there doing some sort of medical training there. So the possibilities are endless. If I had, infinite free time, I would be a lot further along than I am in this. One day I'll get back to it, but
If he lived at home, like in Daysville, isn't that not just likely that he was just kind of a general, like family practitioner?
Sure, more than likely he just served the community. And of course, in that day they did house calls. You wouldn't have probably had an office or anything like that. So, yeah, he was probably more than likely just back here, serving here locally. Gary?
Do you think the Dr. Bailey's house was the Bailey Mansion?
That I'm not sure of. There's a few of the articles, and I could dig into this and you could help me look at it because you're more familiar with the area than I am. It's where a few of the articles give some sort of detail. I think one of them mentions that it's 1 or 2 miles outside of Elkton, and there's a few that just mention specific details. And of course, the name of the resident at the time would be on there. But
the Bailey Mansion fell into disrepair over the years, and 2 or 3 years ago, the bricks and stones were shipped out of state. Someone came and bought them. It was, when it was built, one of the grand houses in the area.
okay,
It had details similar to the Todd County Courthouse and some other structures in the area. And we're sad to see the disrepair it went into.
sure,
I'll have to look that up for you.
okay.
Between Elkton and Daysville on the south side. If you're familiar with
Because I know all those folks out there that you know.
Uncle Dan Kenner's place, it was there. I mean, in that general area. You had to whatever and turn left.
I was going to say,
It was not on the main highway. So yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the photograph. I believe it was his father's photograph that was made at Everling's.
Mm-hmm.
which is of course where the man who took the x-rays.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know if you.
Excellent. No, I had not. I had not. Like I said, some of this stuff I just found this week with the help of different folks. So I've been just trying to. I had a lot of the details of the cases and the timeline, but I was trying to fill it out, especially with photos and that sort of thing, and a few extra articles. So that last effort, I haven't had as much time to really dig into it and match up names and that sort of stuff. So that's a great. That's going in the mental bank.
Probably knew Robert Lane. Certainly was the house that you're talking about on further toward Russellville from Robert's place.
Oh, toward David.
Was it just real close there?
No.
Okay. Because there was a house that was in bad shape, state of repair. I can't. I know the name of the person that was living in it. I can't think. Older gentleman.
I don't think anyone has lived there in our lifetime.
Okay.
It was in that bad state.
Okay. Because I was trying to think if it was, the remnants were still there that I remember.
There is, the Bailey Cemetery is still there in bad shape.
And you said it's on the south side.
Interesting. So, all right, we've got some more leads. I'm ready to go. I may have to come back and do part 2 one day when I have fuller information. Just something I thought to end on. What's in your own family history? So I've done a few asides about what to look for, but there is really some fascinating stuff in each of our family stories. And the things people tend to latch onto are something a little bit more sensational. Mark can attest to this. We've helped a lot of people. So people, if they can find the Vegas connection to being related to Jesse James, they love it. If somebody was in some sort of scandal or something, as long as we're personally far enough removed that we're not experiencing the grief and the loss ourselves, it just becomes an interesting story to us in a lot of ways. So what was not interesting and something you want to dig into necessarily with a family who has still had those memories, but to us is fascinating information. So people love, I've had people get really excited. Oh, my, I found out my great uncle got, hanged in Kansas for, cattle rustling or, something. Just, they love it. David.
I'm sure everybody here is familiar with it. I want to plug Denise Shoulders in the archives.
Absolutely.
Because Denise is a trained forensic genealogist.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at a lot of the police shows, they use that a lot, but she actually had that experience. But she's a fantastic go-to person.
She is.
Between the two, between the library and Mark and Evelyn's work and the work that has been done in the archives,
Right.
We're just a treasure trove,
Yeah.
really, as far as genealogy.
We have a rich history in Logan County, as anybody who lives here can attest. And we're very fortunate that we have the people who have put the work in over the years to make it as accessible as it is. I'll come back to that point too a little bit. Thank you for mentioning that, David. But I really encourage you to dig into your own family. So maybe it's not the sensational stories, maybe it's just the everyday things. Though if it is the sensational stories, you find a lot more articles about that. Nobody was writing articles about your great-great-grandpa who grew up on the farm and had some kids and went to church every Sunday and that sort of stuff. That didn't make the news. What made the news was those out of the ordinary happenings. Research requires multiple sources and a lot more often than not, a lot of luck. So keep that in mind. You can work at it, but sometimes it's just something falls in your lap, and that's always very rewarding. There's so many sources out there that you need to take into account, and I definitely recommend getting with folks like Denise and her team over at the archives. Get with Mark here. Anybody that's lives in an area or has a lot of knowledge in an area. Gary's talked a lot about some of that Todd County history, which of course is going to be really tied in with Logan County history. So find those folks who can help you access resources and also have a lot of knowledge and have done a lot of their own research into that. there's already so much to do. You don't have to start from scratch. Nobody's starting from scratch. We're all working on what others have done over the years. And then at the end, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes you just have to realize that some of those details, you can't find proof of them. You can't find something in writing. You can't find a court record, something like that. Sometimes you just have to let your imagination try to fill in the gaps and assume what would have happened. Just always make sure you let people know that's you putting two things together and not anything you have records to back up. But I do want to encourage everybody to pursue your own family history for yourself, but also especially for those generations that come after it, because you have knowledge and abilities that those that come after you don't know. There's people you remember that they never met. There's pictures and records that one day they're just going to say, what is all this stuff? Who are all these people? If you don't help them out. So you can do a lot right now to help somebody in the future discover more about their family.
Back to what King was talking about earlier too, I was going to say, as far as writing down who's this picture is, we have 2 picture books that have numerous relatives in it. Well, numerous people. But we probably know 10 to 15% of the people that are in those books. We probably have something written on the back. And we only received that because an elderly relative, my mother took it to her, and she was probably in her 90s, I guess, when Mama did that. And she remembered a lot of those people. But there's people that had no clue that it's relative. I'm assuming it probably is in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I say people really past probably great-grandparents don't know, and very few people know by name even who these people are. And it's interesting because you think, well, how about me or these people, and the people that have pictures taken, who the person with the pictures taken out, everybody knows who it is. But put 100, 150 years on it, and strangely enough, all of a sudden nobody knows who that person is.
David?
The DAR and the SAR are also excellent resources.
Absolutely.
Because they, for both of those, you have to show, if you get that linkage, right now, I'm trying to connect to a Lieutenant David guy in the Revolutionary War.
Right.
But I've got to be able to use birth records, marriage records, deeds, and so forth to make that connection.
Right.
I won't be able to use him as a patriot descendant if I don't have all that documentation.
Absolutely.
Sometimes that's very, very difficult.
Right.
But you can build off of what has already been done.
Sure.
The records that they have in their archives.
Absolutely. So use every resource available to you, but also remember to be a resource. We were talking about taking something to an older family member and having them write stuff. Also, once you get past this era I've been talking about, especially when you get up in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, and people started being able to have their own cameras and they took pictures more frequently, relatives sent pictures to each other. So it might be your great aunt that you never met, but mom and dad got a picture from her and nobody wrote the name on the back because everybody knew her. Also, I'll say, for just bringing it all the way up to today, make sure you don't have to, sometimes we have hundreds or thousands of pictures of each other on our phones. You don't need to print out every picture, but print out some really good quality pictures, something that would be a good family keepsake, and put names on the back of those as well. Because one day we may not be able to access that technology. The phone or the memory card or whatever it's on might disappear. So try to have, it's great to have digital and physical, but try to get a handful of those pictures. It's something that somebody might be able to appreciate one day, and they're like, wow, you're their great-great-grandfather, and they're getting to actually see a picture of you. I want to thank a few people before I stop talking. So Mark, I've mentioned already, he's been a ton of help. He's researched, he's helped me get scanning. He's encouraged me. He asked me to do this program, so you all may or may not thank him after this, but gave me the opportunity to do this. He's been a tremendous help. When I went to the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives, they have all the old court records, so all those things I had from the grand jury and stuff during the trial, that was all there. They were great at helping me with the trial research. Denise, which we talked about with David a minute ago, helping me talk through some of the gaps in my family research. She added more to my to-do list than anybody so far. So she's like, well, if you've done this and this and this, and if you do this, you could probably figure out this. So she's a very energetic lady and very passionate lady about what she does, and she gave me some great tips. Wanted to thank my mom for sharing some of those family memories and photos, and I don't have them up here, but my Uncle Paul there, he's jumped in there and shared some things and helped us with some identifications as well. And then last but not least, you always got to thank your spouse, right? So my wife Taylor, she's been moral support. She's proofread stuff or looked over stuff and helped me. And sometimes we debate about something, and it's okay. And listen to me talk about a lot of family history, especially this case over the years. So thank you to all of you all that I mentioned, but thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure. I hope it was interesting to get a little peek inside of the family story, and I hope you find something else worth finding in yours.